Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. There's a heavy dew on the grass. The buzzards are calling in the sky. The hedgerows are festooned with blackberries. There's a change of season in the air. This can only mean one thing. It's time for the Across Wales Walk. Welcome to a very special presentation ceremony for the 60th Diamond Jubilee Across Wales Walk. My Buddy Holly glasses on, I'm afraid. But, there we go. Yeah, we've managed to keep this thing going for 60 editions without a break. I hope you agree that's something that we should really try and celebrate. So after discussing the normal business of yesterday and in our certificates, you know how it goes, we will be unapologetically in full-on nostalgia mode. Hearing less from me, which has to be good, but more from those who have made this event what it is. We like to think of it as one of the great classics of the challenge walking calendar. We will end with getting all the room keys in, and the coaches will probably be leaving from just down the road here at about 11 o'clock. Anyway, how are you feeling?
Tired.
That was 3 nappies, 2 tired. Sore feet, anybody? Yeah. Right, okay. So anyway, let's get straight into it. Yesterday's event. Late on Friday night, the skies seemed to be clear over, and the moon shone bright over Clun. But by the time we arrived at anchor, things had clouded over a bit and the mist hung in the valleys. The overcast conditions seemed to persist until late morning, well, I was at check 2, and it just seemed to clear instantaneously at about 11:30, and the sun came out and burnt away the cloud. What was most remarkable for me was just how still everywhere was. Yeah, the leaves were just not moving on the trees at Clun in the morning. And I think this must have contributed to the warm conditions that we experienced. Perfect for checkers, not so perfect for you lot. Overnight there was clearly a heavy dew, and wetting of many pairs of shoes as you left the road and went over the Kerry Ridgeway, no doubt. Conditions underfoot, well, would you agree, wetter than normal years? Yes. Yeah. So in contrast with many earlier years, conditions I would say were pretty favourable, but a bit too on the warm side. How many of you got a view from the top of Bryn Limon? Hands up. Did anybody not get a view off the top of Bryn Limon? Okay.
I didn't know that.
In front of all these people.
I went the journey route.
Where do you go? You go round the dam?
I went round the dam for the first time ever.
Fair enough.
I call it the girly route.
The girly route.
Girly route.
Fair enough.
Very nice, very nice.
I'm saying nothing.
Time ran out.
Okay, so to the facts and figures then. 93 entrants booked to participate in the 60th Across Wales Walk. Not as many as in former years, but certainly an improvement on last year. Of those 93, 85 were present at the start at 04:58 yesterday morning. Feels like a week ago, doesn't it? Thereafter, we had the following retirements for people who exceeded the CP time. So we had 4 at check 1, 1 at check 2, 4 at check 3, and 11 at check 4. Meaning that we had 65 finishers from 85 starters. That equates to a retirement rate of 24%, which is as far as I'm concerned, that's the highest one I can recall of over 40 years exposure to this event. However, as usual, we had some most noteworthy performances. First home was Ian Jones, who arrived at 14:23 in a time of 9 hours 25 minutes. Gone home. Fair enough, right, okay. Well, save your applause, please. Second and third home were the husband and wife team of Giz Hopper and Matthew Crocker in a time of 10 hours 12 and 10 hours 14 minutes respectively. There's no holding hands as this pair goes on. You two on the trip. At the other end of the spectrum, and I'm not going to name him, now, last man home was at 22:54, just inside the 11 o'clock at night finish time. Yes. But the other remarkable... He's so shy and reserved. However, the extraordinary thing about this edition was that 16 entrants finished between 10 and 11 at night. And again, that's almost unprecedented. Normally, it's much more distributed to an earlier time. So perhaps it's something, again, that reflects the warm weather and its effect on those taking part. Anyway, so every year since 1984, a number of entrants have attempted a double crossing, that is, starting from either Clarach or Borth at the finish and walking through the night to get to the start and then returning with the event proper. This year, 5 people attempted that. So it was Bill Lancashire, Glenn Meek, Stuart Livingston, Patrick Hobbs and John Bartrop. So of those 5, Bill decided one crossing was enough and didn't start. Patrick retired at check 1 on his return journey. John and Stuart retired at check 4, leaving Glenn Meek as the only one to complete on his first double showing, and really exemplifying the fortitude that's necessary with his sore feet and everything else in the process. So all doublers who did or did not complete, on your feet. First home, Ian Jones. Take a minute. I don't mind you lot being naked. Okay.
What about the Marshall's Ball?
Yes.
Coming to that. But before then, what do we do now, smart Alec? As a tradition at this time, remember? Yeah. As a tradition at this time, we must remember to celebrate those for whom Wales was just too wide. In many cases they suffered, walked further than ever before, or just plain done enough. He's going to ask all retirees to stand and receive our adulation. So, as you're probably aware, Dick just mentioned it, for the second time in the event's history, this year we organised 2 Across Wales walks, The supplementary one being the Alan Wright Memorial Marshals Walk on the 17th of June. So, who was Alan Wright, you might well ask? Exhibit A. Alan was a long-standing member of West Birmingham YHA Group, an establishment you'll be hearing more about later on, I'm sure. And Alan was the genuine, lovely bloke, kind and considerate in the extreme, softly spoken, but with every word so well considered. Alan was also a passionate supporter of this event, and he helped for decades until his increasing frailty and reduced vision meant that the long day as a checker was more than he could handle. So, in 2013, celebrating the 50th edition of this event, we announced our first Marshals Walk, giving as many people as possible who had helped us over the years the opportunity to walk part or all of the route. Now, dear Alan just chose to walk the section over Plinlimmon, a mountain he had not ascended in more than 30 years. Graham Bayes walked to the top of the Havering Forest with Alan, and then Graham pointed Alan in the right direction to reach the ridge and its famous fence. Wyn George, Mike Pinner and me then came across Alan heading towards Plinlimmon. As we slowed to his pace to lend support, it was clear that Alan was struggling, but he was loving every step of it. And when he got to the summit, he was just absolutely ecstatic. Thereafter, helpers Mark and Leo Lewis took him under their wing for the descent down to Nantamock. And on the following day, as we assembled to return to Cologne over in Pembryn Hall, Alan was just in seventh heaven over his achievement. Now, in the week that followed, Alan passed away at the age of 78 in the same Birmingham house that he'd been born and brought up in. Whether his death was a consequence of his exertions on the preceding weekend, we'll never know. Thereafter, though, from conversations with Mark and Leo from their time with Alan, and from others who knew him better, a picture emerged of this modest yet remarkable man. Having studied mechanical engineering and pursued his interest in rocket research, he then joined the British Antarctic Survey, where in addition to skiing and dog team skills, he was a pioneer in surveying using radio methods, in which he essentially became the world's leading expert. So significant was his contribution that not only was he awarded the Polar Medal, but the hitherto named Square Peninsula on Adelaide Island in Antarctica was in 1964 renamed the Wright Peninsula in Alan's honour. Now, the modesty of the man meant that most of his achievements were kept under wraps. And so, to preserve Alan's memory, we felt it appropriate to celebrate the Alan that we knew by naming our Marshals Walk in his honour. So, anyway, to that event. Despite opening the Marshals Walk to all and sundry, we had just 5 entrants. As with the COVID specials in 2020 and 2021, we based ourselves at the Anchorage campsite at Anchor and left the border at the usual time of 5 a.m, which in mid-June is very much in daylight. The field quickly split into 2 runners and 3 walkers, one of the walkers being a doubler. Things of note, whilst the heather and the gorse were not yet in flower like they are this weekend, the hedgerows were literally garlanded with honeysuckle, and the sweet smell of which really pervaded the air. The weather was ideal throughout, and the runners completed in 11.5 hours, and the walkers in 16.5 hours at 21:30, 9:30 at night, when again it was still light. Mind you, 10 minutes later the heavens opened. So all in all, a successful Marshals Walk, something we might repeat in the future. Those taking part need certificates, of course. Mike, would you do the honour of calling them out and distributing them, please?
I'm very pleased to. First of all, Rob Young. Paul Courtney. And Stephen Hooper.
Him as well, sorry.
I'm in Spain.
Yeah.
Can you guess which checker would have doubled it? There are two possibilities.
Ron Light.
Ron Layton. Yeah. Ron Layton doubled it, but he's not here.
He's on the Ridgeway 86.
Rosser, somebody you all know rather well, and I'm very pleased to be able to offer to award him the certificate. Stuart Lamb.
Thanks, Mike. So as ever, these things don't happen without support from helpers and those marshals who supported us, specifically Alan Daffern, Richard Rosser, and of course Judith Lamb. Raynet also fielded 5 operators, so literally there were twice as many people supporting this event as there were. Conclusions from the Marshall's Walk. Well, yeah. Walking it is hard, and I suffered. The question is it harder than organising it? Well, it's certainly different. I can tell you that. Okay, just a little bit of background on routes and stuff. As usual, Judith and I spent a day clearing the route last week, and we took that to. We took the opportunity of revising the route description to provide more detail over certain sections and resolve some of the duplicated sections and what have you. We also provided more details for the section over Plyn Limon. Now I'm hoping that this was not responsible for the higher dropout rate in Check 4. Quick bit of market research like we do. So leaving Haffron towards Plyn Limon. How many of you went straight up the bank from the Forest Gate? You my fools. Straight up from the highest point on the Forest Road? Just further down the road? Yeah, okay. How many of you went for the quad bike track? Ah! Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant. How many of you haven't got a first idea? Serious question now on behalf of Raynet, we discussed last night. If next year you were asked to temporarily share your location on Google Maps for the purposes of tracking you across the event, how many of you would likely to participate?
How heavy is it?
No, just using your phone, your smartphone. If you share your... Oh, heavy battery use, sorry. Yeah. Don't know is the answer. Don't know. No, not. Right. Well, no. Yeah. Okay. Just something we're considering anyway. 10 years ago, the first Marshall's Walk, it was made clear to us in Check 3 that we should have asked permission from Natural Resources Wales to use the picnic site there as our checkpoint. So every year since, I've had to fill in one of these massive forms, which is clearly aimed more at the Welsh around the World Rally Championship, in a little walk like ours. But anyway, and then you've got to send it in and sit back for at least 12 weeks while the process takes time to be completed and signatures are granted and all that sort of stuff. So our event went live for bookings on the 1st of May this year, and they started coming in nicely. Now on the 5th, I received an email from young Hannah at Natural Resources Wales, which basically said, many thanks for the applications for your 2 events, because we got the one, the Marshall's Walk and the main event. We are more than happy for you to run these events in Haffron Forest, but unfortunately, you'll need to change the date to the main event. So on the weekend of the 2nd to 3rd September, there will be a closed road rally using the council road through the Haffron Forest, so you won't be accessible. Please can you let me know an alternative event, and any other weekend in August or September would be absolutely fine. So having climbed off the roof and changed my underpants, I was straight on to be contacted at Rally by Ceredigion, with who we have worked very closely, and his response was Natural Resources Wales, not them again. And I said yes. Anyway, so it came to pass that there was no conflict on the roads, and that hopefully you were all able to access the checkpoints and everything else, and everything went all right. Okay, but yeah, it's just a reminder really, you know, an organiser's lot is not a happy one at times, and those aspiring to run their own long distance walking events, please take note. Right, okay, so as I said at the outset, this is our 60th anniversary event, and we do have something to celebrate. And first off, I'm delighted to say that this weekend we have been joined by what I consider to be a Cross Wales Walk royalty, namely Roy and Viv Millard from Birmingham. Roy and Viv were the organisers of the first Cross Wales Walk in 1964. Let's hear it for Roy and Viv.
This is our script. We haven't rehearsed any of it. Okay, that's good.
We are still young.
Viv and I met as members of West Birmingham YHA, a very social and recreational group, and lots of weddings. The idea of walking across Wales in a day had been floating around, but it was on a 35-mile walk between Clun and Nantydernal youth hostels that a group of us decided to do something about it. I was on the committee as walk secretary and had the job of working out a route, and decided we would walk between Plymouth and Forth. Viv sorted the backup team. We decided to use Clun and Forth hostels for accommodation, which meant booking both in their off-season, and that was October 1964. The warden of Forth was very enthusiastic about our idea and volunteered to check out his end of our proposed route. One of his suggestions was that we moved our checkpoint at Nantymock Chapel, as it was under the waters of the new reservoir. And it might be a bit wet. He also got the local press to write a report. On the big day, 11 of us left Lindbury, south of the current start point, at 4:30 a.m. and headed for the sea at Forth.
Now, cast your minds back 60 years, for those of you who are old enough, and see if you can remember a time when there were no mobile phones, no sat-navs, and no internet. Now, imagine what it must have been like the first morning of this first Across Wales Walk, when the checkers got their vehicles stuck in the mud, very soggy mud, and the panic that ensued that we realised we wouldn't get to the first checkpoint. Needless to say, the 11 walkers had no choice but to move on, and we did happen to, because it was up the roadway, we did meet them a bit later and set up a drink stop. Of course, we did turn up belatedly. After showing them they hadn't been deserted at all, we drove on further 2 miles and found a lay-by, which we could brew up a hot drink. This all happened on the road from the old schoolhouse above Blue Lin's Brook to Llanidlos. Luckily for us, it was a long road section, so we were able to find the walkers. There was a lot more road walking in those days. After the walkers had set off again, we drove to Hafren Forest, where the assault on Plynlimmon was to begin. Here we found a tiny lay-by, which we prepared for lunch break refreshments. We couldn't believe it when years later, the popular picnic area we created was on that spot. When the walkers arrived, there was a lot of blister pricking and plastering and feet going on, and one walker, the only lady, decided to drop out. 29 miles later, we were waiting at Nantymock for the walkers to appear at the top of Blinlimmon after their slog up this mountain. It was quite a relief to see those little matchstick men on the horizon. Remember, there was no contact between us, and we had to hope that they could all make it, so it would have been a long way back to find them. As they hobbled on, we drove round to Bourne, where several of us waited by the bog area with torches, hoping to help them to guide the walkers over the last lap, to save them from finishing up in one of the huge ditches, instead of welcoming hostel where the warden was waiting patiently with warm meals for the walkers.
We made it together in 15 hours, 20 minutes. Arriving totally exhausted, we just about managed to crawl out of the bunks the next morning to receive our certificates. We enjoyed the challenge so much that we decided to do it again the following year. Only this time we would invite other local hosteling groups to join us. This experience showed that we needed to have a time limit, as we had people strolling in after midnight, and the warden and his wife were quickly losing their enthusiasm. In 1966, we advertised the walk nationally and had 42 entrants. We used Clun Hostel and had people sleeping everywhere, including on the dining table. We had some publicity for the third walk. I was interviewed for BBC Radio, and there was a write-up in the Birmingham Mail. In 1967, we had another happy event, the birth of our first daughter. This sent us in another direction and kept us away from the YHA. In 1988, we were amazed to discover that the walk with an amended route had become an annual event, and the 25th anniversary walk was scheduled for that September. I decided to enter and couldn't believe what a popular event it had become. The organisation was so much more sophisticated and well run.
We never dreamt that 60 years on we would still be congratulating mad people who were so intent on torturing themselves over each other. And I would like to say, just in case you think I haven't done it, that I've done it twice, but it did take me 4 days each time.
So it all began as a YHA adventure and has now become its own venture, the AWW Association. So much has changed, from a small group of adventurous walkers backed by a few keen supporters to the large operation of today. We organised the first 3 walks. It wasn't easy. We are full of admiration for Stuart and Judith, who have organised it so fantastically well over so many, many years since.
Thank you very much. Thanks, both of you. Okay, let's hear about something different. You know about doubling because you've heard about it this weekend. Well, in that field there is one man above all other associated with this feat, that of Richard Rosser. And yes, Richard has completed a remarkable 20 double crossings. Record of doublings and what have you. Come on down, let's hear it for Richard Rosser.
So, you heard earlier that Nev Tandy did the first ever double in 1984. So, in 1984, I was at Anchorbridge at the start of my third Across Wales walk. So, I just did my first in 1981 when I was a student. I thought it was great, and I kept coming back. But the word going round Anchorbridge in 1984 was that Nev Tandy, and now, who here's heard of Nev Tandy? So, probably less than half of you. But Nev Tandy was an iconic figure in challenge walking. Before the LDWA, he was organising two of the most famous walks in Wales, the Reservoir Roundabout, which happens the first weekend of January, and the Mid Wales Mountain Marathon, which is a crossing of Cadwydrys in the spring. So the word going round was that Nev was going to walk, or was walking, from the coast at Aberystwyth or Porth with a guy called Chris Wynn, and they were going to try and get to the start at Anchor and then turn around and go back and complete a double crossing. And no one had ever done that before. I don't think anyone had ever thought of it. It's a hard thing to think of. You know, would you like to set off on another one now? So, anyway, Nev got to the start. He wasn't there quite at 5 o'clock, so he wouldn't quite make the rules now, but he did get to the start. Chris Wynn retired at the border, but Nev did get back, and he made it back just about, I think, because he wasn't really a long distance man, he was a fast man. And that was the first ever double crossing. So I was quite taken with that, because for two reasons. The first was that I grew up in Rhossili, which is on the tip of the Gower Peninsula, and the next door house was the birthplace of Edgar Evans, who was one of Scott's party on the polar expedition where they all perished. And so their expedition was to go from the coast to a place in the middle of nowhere and then back to the coast. So the appeal of it was related to that. But also, probably more pertinent, was that I did 3 nights in Clem Memorial Hall. Trying to avoid that again. So I came back in 1985 and I did a double, and I kept coming back doing doubles. And I was joined in the 80s by a guy called John Hodges from South Wales, and we did a few doubles. And then in 1991, I got a message. I don't know how I got this message, because we didn't have communication then other than phone and letter. But there was a chap called Clive Lummus wanted to do a double. And I didn't know who he was, didn't know what he looked like. I just thought he'd be someone like me, someone quite young, fit looking. So I arranged to meet him in the cafe on the station in Aberystwyth at 11 o'clock on a Friday. So I got to the cafe, and there was no one in there except this little old guy sat in the He said, "Oh, hello, Richard." And he's been one of my best friends ever since. So he should be over there doing this talk with me, but his wife's developing dementia. He was out at 1 yesterday, and he was at Clem on the Friday night, but he had to go back. So that's time and timed. But anyway, we doubled all through the 90s, and we sort of developed these sort of set rules, like the event that you did had an 18-hour time limit. So the sort of rule for a double is that you have 18 hours to get across from the coast to the border. So that means you have to start at 11 o'clock on the Friday morning, to give you 18 hours to get to anchor. So you can start any time after that you like, but to get the maximum time, you'd start at 11. And you'd always leave the coast between Aberystwyth and Porth, because you've probably heard of the rotary across Wales Walk. And that goes from near McAuliffe, I think, right at the estuary. Well, we view that isn't quite the same. So we've got those two set points, and the rest is entirely up to what you want to do. You can go whichever way you like. One of the key factors is to get to Llanid Lois before the chip shop closes. There's a chip shop cafe there. You can sit down in there. They're very accommodating. Have a good rest there. And then me and Clive and all the others who joined us, we tended to stop at a place called Blackgate Bar, which is it doesn't exist any longer. It was taken down maybe 10 years ago. We used to stop there and sleep there for a couple of hours before finally making the last few miles to the border. And I did always wonder whether these groups of men who met there in the night might have had some reason why it was decided to be taken down. So over the 90s and going further, different people were drawn to this and started doubling. And I've got a spreadsheet at home, and I can look at who was doubling in what years, and you see little groupings that define certain eras of time. But people would come along, they'd do some singles, and then they'd hear about the doubling, they'd be attracted to it. They'd come and double, and then they'd come back for a few years or longer, and then they'd disappear from doubling. But some carry on still do the event. So the 90s were characterised by the Lugmas, Stevenson, Gretton and Philip Willing era, and then the early 2000s by the Austin, Sorensen, Wyn George, Mike Gammon, Rod Holland era, and then later in that decade, David Hooper and Tony Walton were prominent doublers. And then in the last decade, from 2010 on, Bill Lancashire, Brian Layton, Janet Pitt-Lewis, Chris Pritchett, and Chris Poole. I've put yours. No, that's it. Just added it this morning. But I think the unique thing, and why I'm particularly pleased that Glen Mead finished this year, is that in all that 40 years since the first double, there's never been a year without a successful completion. And it's sort of got popular enough, say over the last decade, for 5%, 10% of the entrants to be doublers. So, and in that total time, there's been 53 different people have doubled. So, I've just got a few notable performances that happened over that era, the whole period. So, first double in '84, first woman appears, successful double in 2000. That was Susan Denham-Smith, and her goal was to sledge haul to the South Pole. So she used to train by wearing a sledging harness and dragging the front tire of a tractor around over the Lake District. So she was really, a solid, steady walker. Even her husband said that she was half horse. But she did the double. She made it. First woman to try a double, actually. And since then, there have been eight women who've successfully did the double, including Vicky Kemp, I think you're here, and Janet here. So Janet especially, Janet's done 4 doubles, more than any other woman. husband and wife, together, doubling. Anyone like to guess who that was?
Tony and Angela.
Excellent. Tony and Angela Walton. And they're still married, aren't they? Father and son. Mike and Tom Page. Very nice.
Where's mine?
Tom's coming. Found an excuse this weekend, or?
Yeah, you have to get married.
Yeah.
It wasn't that quick though.
And from what I remember, the whole family could have successfully doubled if they could read a map properly. So, doubling's enough for me. I've thought of more, but realistically, who the hell wants to do more than a double? But Rod Holland, 2003, I was sat on the prom in Aber. Friday morning, in walks Rod, great big backpack on. He started at Anchor at 5 p.m. on Thursday, walked over, joined me and whoever it was that year, went back, did double, triple crossing. Big leather boots. Only one ever double that was sub 24 hours. So this was Chris Pritchett about 8 years ago. So to do a fast double, you have to start late on the Friday because you've got to get to Anchor by 5. That's a fixed point. So you've got to leave later and later on the Friday afternoon. And he's the only one who's been back and across in under 24 hours. Then 2006, the three doublers. David Hooper, David Williams, Tony Grimes had a combined age of 210. And Bill Lancashire is the only man who's done 10 consecutive doubles. That's nearly at the end, but inevitably, the one person I must talk about is Brian Lee. I'm quite glad he's not here, really. Just one less special problem to deal with. So, when Brian was 62, he did a double. Nothing unusual about that. So he came back when he was 63 and did a triple. Yeah, okay, that's pretty impressive because that was 10 years after Rod or so. The year after, when he's 64, he came back and did a quadruple. I mean, people couldn't get their head around that. And he made it back and he was pretty good at the end. So inevitably, people say, are you going to come back and do 5? and he came back. But the reason he's not here today is because he's doing the Trail Runners Association 86-mile race along the Ridgeway, which coincides with this weekend, but normally it's August Bank Holiday weekend. And that event is more important to him than this. So this is sloppy second as far as So whenever he's done an across Wales walk, double, triple, quad, he's always done an 86-mile event the previous weekend along this hard Ridgeway route. So he's coming to do a quintuplet, like a 5 crossing, which would start at 5 a.m. on the Wednesday morning. And he's only finished this 86-mile event on the Sunday afternoon. He got to 200 miles, and Jane Bays was driving up towards Havre, found him on the road. She opened the car and said, "Brian, would you like to get in the car?" And he just succumbed, and so, if it had been me, I wouldn't have let him in. So would that satisfy him? No. He came back a total of 4 years in succession to try and do a quintuple, and he'd get to 3. He'd get to 3 double 3 crossings before he retired, but in the end he said, no, enough is enough, I'll just do doubles instead. So cross about the events coinciding, but he did the double in the Marshall's event in June. So, how do I remember all this? Well, the reason I remember all this is that about 15 or 20 years, Stuart told me that he was writing a book about the would I do a chapter on doubling? So I got all my bits and notes and certificates and compiled it all, and Clive typed it all up. We presented Stuart with this report. And then the book wasn't ready, so the following year I just updated it with the following year's report. So 20 years later, I'm still updating one of these days. I'm very glad I'm up to 80 sides of Word document now. None of it would have happened, I think, if it wasn't for Roy and Viv starting it, and particularly Stuart and Judith carrying it on. So you can thank them for it all.
Yeah, glad the weather was good.
Well, yeah, so were we all.
Yes, yes. I did attempt to walk it myself back in 1993.
Goodness, yeah.
But I retired at Havren, I'm afraid. So I haven't done the whole thing. Yes, I'm secretary of the North Dyfed Raynet group. And again, I've been secretary for 30 years. Because no other bugger wants to take it. Yeah. This event is the largest annual event between Paris Group and ourselves. In the past, we've fielded sometimes more than 25 people. This year it's 16 people, because some are more interested in cars. Can't have that. Yeah, we're involved with safety, numbers, timings. It's developed really from basic paper, back in the old days, to basic spreadsheets when computers were invented, and now to speed and anticipated times. And this idea has actually been taken further as well. Not quite to the same degree, I have to admit, but our local Devil's Bridge Walking Club, another one I'm on the committee for, but the track is kept of who, how far, capability, and the walk suitabilities. So there's quite a lot of info on that, which Stuart's been doing every year with the Cross Wales. We, of course, would like to thank Stuart, Judith, and the whole of the bread pudding team. We enjoy this event far more because of the excellent organisation, which we're used to now. Far more organised than some cycling events where some disappear early or just go on the wrong route. There was one recently where 2 just disappeared. We never know where they were. And the worst one is horse trials, where they go back to their horse box without signing out, without telling anyone. It's a bit of a nightmare. So this is wonderful. Wonderful and wonderfully organised, particularly by Dave Price, doing all the computerised entries and things like that. But personally, I'd like you all to offer a vote of thanks to Stuart and the team, if you may.
Yesterday exemplified this in terms of coordinating recovery of people from roundabout checkpoint 4, and that it made it absolutely marvellous. We've come on so far.
And running out of water again.
Running out of water, yeah. You thought we got the better of that one, but thanks very much, Ray. Cheers. Right, something completely different. Some of you will have seen that this year I documented an alternative route off Plinlimmon, which may be used to avoid the summit in foul weather. And this has been named Leo's route. Does anybody see that? Yeah. Anyway, the Leo in question is Leo Lewis, at the back. And she's also known as the Lady in Blue, who inhabited the mists of Plinlimmon a few years back. Trapped, she executed a circuitous route trying to weigh off the Big P, seemingly ending back at the same place. And on the 60th event, I think it only appropriate that we pay homage to that extraordinary mountain by hearing Kathy Tytler's Ode to Plinlimmon once again, in which the aforementioned immortalised person is immortalised. So Kathy, the Bard of Berkshire, where are you? Do you want to come forward and give us your poem? Round of applause for Kathy.
I dedicate this poem to our mountain that we know and love in many moods. And as Stuart said, we had horrendous weather, and he asked me to write a poem to try and placate the mountain. And so when I do the walk, I do go down the route and I say this poem to the mountain. So this is my ode to Plinlimmon. Clunton and Clunbury, Clungunford and Clun are the quietest places under the sun. A houseman, a Shropshire lad. But under the stars in a clear night sky, 200 feet are walking by. Hushed, no noise must we make. At 4 in the morning we must never awake the slumbering, dreaming good folk of Clun. And now we're away, it will once more become the quietest place under the sun. At Anchor Bridge the breeze awakens, and leaves on hedgerows all are shaken, and Stuart, in his time-honoured style, sends us on our way with his wry little smile. On Kerry Ridge the breeze goes stronger, and walking feet stride faster, longer. Clouds rush in from a threatening sky, promise rain today, by and by. Running down the valley into Llanny Dam, remembering rainbows, how they once shone, but it's Plinlimmon's mood that defines the day. Will wind and rain be kept at bay? Will the mountains shine, our jewel of mid-Wales, or will we be lashed by storms and gales? Walkers new to this crossing have heard tell tales of the mountain whose bulk does swell clear above Haffron's forest green, to the blue of the sky, not a cloud to be seen. And legend also tells the tale of clothes discarded as its flanks were scaled, sweating and burning in the late summer heat, wearing shorts and t-shirts for this climbing feat. And at your summit, fair Plinlimmon, Nanty Mock sparkles in sun. The air is still, the view is clear. With confidence we avoid your crags so sheer. Today, against the wind we struggle, waterproofed and hooded in our own cold bubble. On compass bearing blind we climb, getting wetter all the time. Another figure is now in our midst. The lady in blue appears out of the mist. In wind with difficulty we did speak, she had been lost upon your peak. Held by you in your veil of mist, and by your stormy countenance kissed. You kept her firmly in your hold, as she wandered lost, tired and cold. 'Twas not till next day that her tale was told, and the spite of the mountain did unfold. We make our way to safer ground beneath your crags that loom and frown. To checkpoint 4, that is our plan, using vehicle track made by Dercumry's van. Plinlimmon, for many years you've been in a strop, many have climbed up to your top, some lost and cold and fit to drop. Plinlimmon, this mood just has to stop. The mountain replies. Beneath my skin, a giant slumbers, untroubled by the feet of numbers of walkers who usually keep north to the glamour of Snowdonia's peaks. Alone in mid-Wales, I'm watching, brooding, a 5-peak massif forever moody. I spend some time in silence, bypassed, dismissed. Some folk don't even know I exist. Of 5 rivers, I alone am the source. I work with my weather, a water resource, each river watched over by a naiad of the fountain, sending water to the sea from me, the great mountain. All year long, we bring life force from the sky, just my 5 water nymphs and I, filling the reservoir of Nanty Mock. Water is life, and that's what we've got. Just one day each year, many people come, awakening the giant from my rocky tomb. In foul mood, I'm disturbed in my sleep, thinking only of my solitude to keep. I pull a veil of mist across my face and summon rain and wind to disrupt your race. Plinlimmon, we acknowledge that you bring treasure more precious than silver and gold. Your hailstones are worth more than diamonds too. Water, your riches that life must behold. Providing this bounty we know is your task. Water is life. We need it for food. We come in peace, and all that we ask is that you greet us in a sunnier mood.
And finally, Mike Page has offered just to share a few anecdotes from his years on the Crosswells Walk. Mike?
I'm not going to say a lot because time's pressing.
It is in a way, but yeah.
So when I met Stuart in the middle of the summer and he asked me if I'd be prepared to say a few things, I thought about, I think, the funniest 3 or 4 stories that I've had in this fabulous event. I dug out all my certificates from this file, and you can tell how important I think it is because it's there with my first ever medical registration certificate. My degree certificates, my disclosure and barring service certificates, and perhaps most importantly, my grade 3 clarinet playing certificate. On my 50th crossing thing, which one of these days, like your book, we'll get stuck. Yeah, well. So my first ever Crosswells walk was in 1999. And in 1999, I arrived with a friend and we went into Clun Memorial Hall. You've heard a lot about that this morning. I have to tell you, it's the last time I slept on that floor. I was shocked, actually, and quite I think I had PTSD after the first time. From one section of the grouping, I'd never heard quite so much snoring, grunting, and farting. And the men were pretty noisy too. And then the next shocking thing that happened at about 3:30, 4:45 in the morning, when nobody's really at their best, I went into the men's toilet and was presented with a row of naked bottoms sticking up in the air whilst the vazzing up procedure. I'd never ever seen this happen before, and unfortunately I've never had to see it happen again. But I know why it's done, because after that first event, when I was chafed myself. The other lovely story of Clun, which I've told before actually, I came back again on my own in September 2000 to do my second crossing, bearing in mind that I'd met Judith for about 3 minutes a year ago with 100 other people. I walked into the Memorial Hall to register, and she said, "Hello, Mike." And that's testament to the way that these two think about us and care for us and get to know us. And it's part of the reason this event is so special to me, and I think to all of you lot. And the last club memorial story I've got was again on that second crossing, when you go and you pick your slightly soggy toast up, yeah? Slap on the butter, which is pretty soft as well, and the jam, a nice cup of tea, and in front of me, on the counter, was a pot of Marmite. Oh, a bit of that, I said. So I dug my knife into it, and I was about to transfer it to the bread when the chap next to me said, "That's my personal Marmite." Not here, are you? So that was embarrassing. I said, well, "Would you like me to put it back?" Another story I've got, because these presentations are always memorable, but there was one particular, I don't know which year it was, and I don't know who it was, but a regular crosser who'd done half a dozen crossings without any particular problem, limped into checkpoint 3 with a very badly blistered left foot. Right foot was perfect. And he was really surprised because he'd never had foot problems. It transpired that at the start he put on his own right foot and his wife's left foot. He froze. So that one. Then just two more little stories. One of the hardest things I ever had to do was when I was doing my first double. And I was walking with my son Thomas. And I had to leave him writhing in agony in between checkpoint 1 and 2 at the side of the road. Because he had blistered badly. He tried to patch them up. He couldn't go any further. He could hardly put his foot to the ground. And he said, "Go. Just you walk on. You're fine. You'll finish. I'll get myself to 2 somehow." Of course, he did walk in the end. And then the great thing was, the next year, we completed it together. And he had the same blister problem at the same place. But he walked through it and he finished. So this event has caused a lot of pain. It's caused a huge amount of pleasure in my life, in members of my family's life. And I'm going to carry on coming back because it's just such a marvellous part of the year. I've made so many friends in this organisation. I've met so many wonderful people and some incredible people. Brian Latham, what a man. Richard Rosser, what a man. Glenn Meek, I met Glenn properly on Friday. Fantastic performance there. But it would not be possible without student Judith, to whom I am sure you are incredibly grateful. Thank you.
The buses are, thank you Mike, Laurie, the buses are due to depart at 11, but they will wait for us, so no problem. I just wanted to add my own anecdote from yesterday. An amazing thing happened at Check 5. As the entrance sat in chairs at the checkpoint, my ears detected a familiar regional accent. So on leaving, I just thought I'd ask one guy called Christopher Layton whether or not he came from the country of my birth, the county of my birth, namely Derbyshire. Chris confirmed he did. I asked him which town. He said Ripley. It's the town in which I was born and bred, and I said that I used to live halfway down Oxford Street. Chris asked me my name. I replied, not surprisingly, Stuart Lamb. Staggeringly, Chris then said that he knew me and that we'd been at infants and junior school together. And Chris could remember me bringing cobbler's wax to school. My dad was a shoe repairer. And we took this cobbler's wax and went down Sandham Lane in Ripley to take rubbings of the tree bark. Now I reckon this was when we were both 5 or 6, and that's 60 years ago. So possibly around about the time of the first Across Wales Walk in 1964. And coincidence didn't stop there, because we then established where Chris lives, and he lived opposite the former site of Copper Beach's filling station, which used to be operated and owned by my grandfather and my uncle. Chris also knew one of my childhood friends who lived further down the same road. Chris and his wife Sue were just exiting the checkpoint as we talked, and I expect we could have gone on for hours and delayed his departure, but I'm hoping that Chris, we will talk again at some stage. What an amazing coincidence, yeah. Right. One entrant in this year's event was using the Crosswells Walk as an opportunity to raise money for his chosen charity. Martinez, could you tell us just a charity that is, please?
Yeah, it's Welsh Children's Cancer Charity, and you can go to www.latchwales.org. They're based in Cardiff. They support children and their families when they need it most. So from the moment they're diagnosed.
And you've had a personal connection with one of your...
Yes, just recently now, yes. Yeah. He passed away in June. He was 11
years old.
Yeah.
And he'd had cancer since he was 4.
He had cancer since he was 4, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, as a parent, you know, you just find it understanding to be in such a situation.
So when I went through the gate that you talked about, which routes people took up to Plynlimmon, I did something a bit daft. I went for a swim in the source of the Wye, and I saw the summit, and I went with a ruler straight to the top, which cost me my time. But I've met 2 lovely marshals who did the right things, and one kindly gave me a nice lift over to Bont Walk, and I made sure that I met the parents to walk with them to Clark.
Well, whether you finish or not, we're going to support you as much as we can. Yeah. What do you think of a friend that we've lost who would grasp this very situation? And you think, what's this doing? Oh. How about that? Yeah. Who am I talking of? Peter Stevenson. Yeah. So what Peter would do, I mean, Peter was just the best, wasn't he? And knew him, you know, he would sum up exactly how he felt about this event and everything else. And if he latched onto somebody that's doing a charity event, he would do whatever he could to maximise the income. So, Martin, so what I want you to do is, before the people leave, you don Peter's hat and you hold Peter's rucksack in your hands, and will you please support Martinez's charity? And if you do, for every donation we get, you get an exclusive 60th anniversary Crosswells Walk badge. And if you want to buy more of them, they're £2 each. But please be generous and support the charity. So well done, Martin. Okay, so let's wrap things up. It's time to have some final thanks to those who made yesterday possible. We've already thanked Rainer for doing just a terrific number of tasks on our behalf. But let's give Rainer another round of applause. And there are your literally sensational group of checkers drawn from friends and previous entrants. No one should be under any illusion that checking on this event is an easy option. Their fortitude, their willingness to serve was undiminished throughout yesterday's event, just as it is every year. You try standing at Claret Bay for 10 hours, you know, remarkable. As usual, let me name these people individually. Lynn and Dave Yorston, Graham and Jane Bays, Matt Clark, James Kingham, Peter Hatcher, Kathy Titler, Mike Page, Richard Rosser, Jan Pitt Lewis, Stephen Sarah Errington, Leo Lewis, and Paul Jeffrey. Paul, all the way from Southampton, just to check. You know, fantastic. I give you the brilliant checkers. in her own inimitable style. Checkpoint boxes, refunds, rooming lists, the baking of cakes, and a multitude of other tasks which don't get seen, but without which it would not run half as smooth. It's directly as a result of their dedication to this event that, for example, your rooms last night were close to your friends, and that those expected to finish early were on the upper floors. And those expected to finish late were on the lower floors. Yes, it didn't work, okay. So, and then there's the cakes. There's checkpoint supplies, and this year it's all been done only with one operational arm since a cycling accident. Running this event does put high demands on us, and particularly at this time when we've got other things resting on us as well. How the heck we did this when we're both working, I just don't know, but anyway, when it all comes good, it seems to make sense. But anyway, for now, let's have a please big hand for my partner in this event. Will you wrap things up?
Keep this very brief. But something occurred to me from what Stuart said a few minutes ago. I was a few years ahead of Stuart at the same grammar school. I used to live in the next town. And I want to remind Stuart I've got some class photos of Stuart. And unless he's kind to me, they might appear on the Facebook page. Also, I'm going to bore you with one other thing. We're talking about records, and it was reminded that I hold the record for having said never again. It started in 2017 when it was my 8th double crossing. I was zigzagging down the road to Bow Street, and Dave Hood comes up behind. Do you want any help? No, I'm fine. So I zigzagged a bit anyway. Called him back. Yeah, okay. I didn't see help. So he just about got me going to Bow Street, and he said, I need a snack. So he put me down on the bench, went to the spar shop, came to collect me, set off down to Bow Street to Claret. What did I realise? I left my quite expensive torch on this seat at Bow Street. So we put another mile or two in going back. So that was that year. Then it occurred to me the next year, yeah, I will do another. Because I was 70 years old. That seemed to go fine. So I thought, maybe we should pop another in. Because it was going to be my 10th double crossing. And my younger daughter said, oh, for goodness sake, Dad, I can't deal with the stress. I'm going to do it. So she said, right, I'll come and walk the back with you. Remember, she's never done a challenge walk before in her life. So we did a few little walks around South Wales in the summer, and she duly came up and walked all the way back with me, which was absolutely amazing. Now what happened the next year? So that was 10 cross. I thought, well, may as well pop another one just to... So I did have a go in 2020 where she came up to scrape me up off the road near checkpoint 2. It was too tempting to get in the car. Then what happened? 2021. Yeah, I thought I'd have another go then. That seemed to go reasonably okay. 2022. I had a year off, didn't I? And this year, my daughter had just given up. She said, so she told me to get a little track for something where I was. Got to the start and had a lovely walk the first day. And for the first time in my life, I was sensible and said, I'm not even going to start this time. And to top it all, Leo decided to record me saying never again. So, seriously, the reason I'm standing here is do one thing that no one else can, that Stuart can't do himself. Putting together all this, we know what's involved, no point in repeating all this. So Stuart, along with Judith, and it's lovely to see Sarah back again, part of the family here. Can we all get on our feet and give a great round of applause?